Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a concept that's, honestly, a lifesaver. We're talking about how to take a project that feels like total chaos and bring it under control. So, if you've ever managed a project, or hey, even just tried to plan a big trip, you're going to want to stick around for this.
You know that feeling, right? You're looking at this massive goal, this to-do list that's a mile long, and you just have no clue where to even start. It's that sinking feeling of being completely and totally overwhelmed. So what if I told you there's a whole discipline dedicated to turning that chaos into control? Well, there is. It's called project management. And listen, I know it might sound like some corporate buzzword, but it's really not. It's just a powerful, super structured way to get from point A to point B without losing your mind.
All right, so at the very heart of all this, you've got the project manager. Just think of them as your guide through a maze, right? They've got 4 key functions they use to make sure you don't get lost and actually make it to the end. And here they are, the big 4. First up is project planning. That's basically figuring out what you need to do. Then comes project scheduling, which is all about when you're going to do it. After that, you've got project monitoring, which is just keeping an eye on everything to make sure it stays on track. And finally, project reporting, keeping everyone in the loop. Simple as that, but every single one is absolutely crucial.
Now look, all 4 of these are super important, but honestly, the whole thing, it all hinges on that first one, planning. It is the absolute foundation of the entire project. If you get the planning right, you are setting yourself up for success. But if you get it wrong, the whole thing can come down like a house of cards.
Okay, so how do we actually build that solid foundation? A really great project plan, it's not just some fuzzy idea in your head. No way. It's a detailed, step-by-step blueprint for success.
And crafting this blueprint really just boils down to 3 key steps. First, we're going to break all the work down into smaller, more manageable chunks. Then, we'll figure out the logical order for those pieces. And finally, and this is the magic part, we're going to find the one sequence of tasks that dictates the entire timeline.
So that first step is called a work breakdown structure, or WBS for short. And the idea here is so simple but so powerful. You stop staring at the giant mountain you have to climb. Instead, you break it down into a series of smaller, totally manageable tasks, like individual stones. All of a sudden, the whole thing feels so much more doable, right?
Okay, so once you've got your list of tasks, there are a couple of classic ways to visualize them. The Gantt chart on the left, you've probably seen these before. It's basically a timeline with bars showing when each task starts and ends. It's great for a quick snapshot. But for really understanding how all the tasks connect to each other, the PERT chart on the right is way more powerful. It actually shows you the relationships and the flow, which is what you really need to manage the work.
Right, so you've got your list of tasks. Awesome. But a list by itself isn't a plan. The real magic, the thing that turns a list into a strategy, is understanding how all those tasks connect, the dependencies between them.
And that brings us to step 2 of our planning process, identifying the task pattern. Just think of it as the project's internal logic. I mean, for any project, big or small, some things just have to happen before other things can start. It's a sequence, kind of like lines of code in a program.
And generally speaking, your tasks are going to fall into 2 buckets. On one hand, you have dependent tasks. These have to be done one after the other. You can't read Chapter 2 before you've read Chapter 1, right? Then you have concurrent tasks. These are things you can do at the same time. Think about cooking. You could be chopping vegetables while the water for your pasta is coming to a boil.
This is where 2 super important terms come into play. A predecessor task is just a fancy way of saying it's a task that has to be finished before another one can start. And a successor task, well, that's the one that comes after. That's it. And just understanding this simple relationship is what lets you map out the entire logical flow of your project.
All right, and all of that, the tasks, the dependencies, it all leads us to the third and final step in our planning. And let me tell you, this is the big one. This is one of the most powerful, game-changing concepts in all of project management.
It's called the critical path. So what is it? Simply put, the critical path is the longest chain of tasks that are all dependent on each other. Think about that. It's the one path through your project that has 0 downtime, which means it represents the absolute shortest amount of time your project can possibly take. And you really can't overstate how important this is. The quote on screen says it all. If any task on that critical path gets delayed, even by a single day, the entire project's finish date gets pushed back by a day. There is literally no wiggle room, no slack, nothing. So,
Why is this so incredibly powerful? Because it tells you exactly where you need to focus your attention. You might have hundreds of tasks, but the critical path shows you the handful that truly matter, the ones you have to protect at all costs if you want to stay on schedule. It cuts through all the noise and gives you a crystal clear set of priorities.
So, the next time you're staring down a big goal, a huge project, or heck, even just a really complicated week ahead, don't just get overwhelmed by the chaos. Stop and ask yourself, what tasks depend on each other? What's the longest chain I can make? What's my critical path? Because once you find it, you've found your roadmap to the finish line.